Hello, class. Welcome back from spring break. I am your instructor, Arnetta Willis, Psychology 200, and we are in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. Therefore, as you're aware, we are doing distance learning, possibly throughout the remainder of the semester. But I have placed some things out in our announcements that's giving you a schedule for the remainder of the semester. We've had to amend our syllabus, so please go along with this updated information. Each week, you will have an assignment to complete. That assignment would do two things. It would give you a grade, and it would also serve as your attendance. So generally, there's one assignment per week. You can complete it by the assigned date, and as long as it's completed during that time, you will receive credit for attendance for the week. Please note that it is important that you complete all assignments as outlined. Remember, refer back to the announcement that I put out that had the list of weekly assignments. Here is week beginning March 30th through about April 3rd. This is the week that we're in now. You've returned back from spring break, and the chapter that we're going to focus on this week, chapter 12, social psychology. You will have an assignment to complete, which is simply to do a 10 point or 10 page or 10 slide would be a better word, 10 slides explaining what you've learned from the chapter on social psychology. And remember, this is the field of study that's concerned with the ways in which people affect each other's thoughts, attitudes, and behaviors. There's a lot of interesting information in this particular chapter on social psychology. You will look at all of those things as you're reading through the chapter. You can always refer back to this PowerPoint to get additional information, or hopefully to help you to understand the information in your text just a little bit better. But first impressions are some of the things that we're going to look at in this chapter. And remember, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. So very true. And a lot of our thoughts about people come about as a result of us having met them the first time and the opinion that we formed at that first meeting. Look at stereotypes. This is basically an impression of how you feel toward other people. Stereotypes occur when you assume that all members of a group share common features or characteristics. It can affect how we perceive others. It can be positive. It can be negative as well. But one of the things we found with stereotypes is it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. That is, what you expect to happen, you really make it happen with that particular person. We're going to talk some about attributions, that whether they are external or internally motivated, and the tendency to attribute behavior to internal causes or to external causes. So please pay attention to those things. And these are also some of the things that you can place on your PowerPoint as well. Now, don't really want you to give us verbatim what you've seen here on these slides, or even what's in the book, but try and kind of assimilate or give me what you understand about the text. You don't have to do everything in the chapter. You could select just a particular segment of the chapter. Here we're talking about attitudes. How do you feel about things? And those attitudes are going to reflect our judgments about other people, objects, and social issues. We use our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors that also affect our attitudes. So look at that and then see how you feel about that, if you agree or disagree with those theories and why you agree or disagree. Psychologist Leon Festinger proposed that we experience an uncomfortable state of what's called cognitive dissonance when our attitudes are inconsistent with our behavior. For instance, in this slide, the lady is a healthcare professional, so her belief is that she can help people, but she's standing outside smoking, which is we know can cause significant health problems. So she has to reconcile in her mind her belief system that she's doing good, she wants to help people, and she knows what the dangers of smoking can do to a person's body, and her need to smoke. And how do you resolve that cognitive dissonance? No doubt you may even have areas in your life where you've had to change your thought process to match your behavior. That's cognitive dissonance. If this is true and you're interested in that, then complete a PowerPoint presentation focusing on cognitive dissonance. So, the art of changing people's mind, I think all of us have been armchair psychologists in this area. This is something that we need to look at. Elaboration likelihood model. Your motivational state is high, plus your skills and knowledge needed to evaluate the message is high. Then the elaboration likelihood is high. You will process this information more positively than you would if those things were not in place or if they were not high. You look at the other side in blue, and it shows you that your motivational state is low, skills and knowledge is low, as well as elaboration likelihood. And that's a peripheral route of evaluation of cues, and you're not likely to change an individual's mind if those things are in place. This may be something you'd want to discuss on your PowerPoint. Again, there's so many social issues in our text and in our world around us even now. Think about what we're going through with this coronavirus. Let's see. People are being laid off work. Other people are still working. But the stimulus package say that possibly everyone within a certain tax bracket or within a certain pay range could receive a stimulus check. Now, you can look at that from a cognitive dissonance perspective, or you can look at it from how do you influence or change someone else's mind about that particular situation, or there are any your attitude about that situation. There are any number of ways you could just take that particular topic and complete a PowerPoint addressing that particular issue of whether or not we can, our feelings on receiving the stimulus check. How do we relate to other people? What's the basis of our relationship with other people? Basically, very simple. You know that as well. You've seen it in your own environment, in your own life. Attraction is one of the ways that we get to know, like, or love individuals. It's what we feel toward others, whether it's romantic or friendship. It is affected by a number of factors such as similarity. What do you guys have in common? Your physical attractiveness. What do you think is attractive? Those are some of the kinds of things that we tend to look at. Proximity has an issue or contribution toward how we feel toward others or how attractive we are to other people. Reciprocity and the matching hypothesis, which is, do you find it odd to see a couple where one person appears far more or much less attractive than the other? I can remember, I think it was Cindy Crawford, the model, married this, I cannot remember his name, this country music star, but he wasn't the most attractive. I want to say his name was Lyle Lovett, but he wasn't the most attractive person. And of course, Cindy Crawford was a beautiful model, and people wondered and questioned that decision for almost a year, I'm sure. But those are the kinds of things we look at from a social perspective. Social psychology deals with how we interact with other people, how we influence them, how they influence us, the need for us to have that social reaction or interaction with others. Love, all of us have at some point experienced love. We want to be in love. We all need to be loved. And this is one of the topics in social psychology. Makes a lot of sense. How are you going to talk about the human social component without discussing the greatest component, which is love? And that brings me to another point with what's going on now with the coronavirus. And it's not necessarily the emotion of love, but here we talk about intimacy, passion, and commitment. At this point, we're talking about social distancing. So how do we maintain this or show this emotion for others during our period of social distancing? So the love, deepest emotion, again, involves intimacy, passion, and commitment. Review those, if you will, and make a decision about how that affects your life and how that affects others' lives. Most of you are parents, or you're married, or you're in serious relationships. Love is the power that binds in that relationship. Here's another social behavior that we have to look at, and it's helping. How do you lend a hand to others in need? Again, this is a very important time in our society. We're dealing with this coronavirus, and it's going to take a lot of help from others for us to make it through. One way to take your mind off your situation is to help others. But let's just look at figure 12.6 here, a decision-making model of helping. Step 1, is there a need for help? Then yes. Then you go to step 2. If no, then you don't help. It's a failure to help. This guy in a bad way needs help. Step 2 say, yes, if there's a need for help. Then step 2, is this an emergency situation? Something needs to be done immediately. If you don't think so, if it's no, the answer is no, then you won't help. But if the answer is yes, then you proceed to step 3. And it's just the guy saying, I just can't walk away. I've got to help. Do I need to get involved? Again, if the answer is no, you won't help. But if the answer is yes, you move to step 4. And I know what I must do to help. Is there a way that I can help? In this time, think about what we're dealing with as a nation, taking home in our city, in our state, in our country, and even the world at large. We're going to have to rely on others for help at some level. But is there a way I can help? If you think no, if you can't think of anything that you can bring to the table to help someone else, then you will not help. But if you think yes, we proceed to step 5, and the question now becomes, am I ready to act? So, okay, here goes. If the answer is no, you fail 911. And that's simply a preconceived attitude toward a specific group of people. This can lead to different treatments of that group of people. And oftentimes that behavior is known as discrimination. So that may be something that you'll want to look at as well. Human aggression. We know that oftentimes we've seen aggression in our society. A good question would be, will we see fewer incidents of aggression or human aggression as we deal with this coronavirus pandemic? Some believe that it is a human instinct to behave aggressively, but modern psychology goes beyond such a simplified explanation, and it focuses on what other factors that may impact human aggression, such as biology, learning, social cultural influences, alcohol use, emotional states, and environmental influences. So we're going to go on forward and look at some of the group influences. Who are we? Are we more an individual society, or are we collective? What is the personal relationships between one's personal identity and their social identity? The personal involves that psychological identity that involves our sense of ourselves, our own uniqueness. And social identity involves the sense of ourselves as members of a particular group. Here is a study that was done many years ago, Solomon Asch. You can look that up in more detail on YouTube to get an example of what that experiment involves. But it's a conformity study. Do we see much of that in our lives today? You may want to look this up and complete your PowerPoint presentation on Chapter 12 on Solomon Asch conformity study. That would be a great thing. And maybe you can share it with other members of our class. Compliance. Attempting to get others to do what you want them to do involves compliance. And these are some of the techniques that are used. And you can look those up in your text too for a more detailed description of what they are. Lowball technique. They may say, like, you can get this for $19.99, and once you get it, then you're informed of all the other charges that go along with it. Bait and switch is simply you go into the store looking for an item that you saw in a circular that was on sale. Once you get there, it's not on sale, but we got something else for you. That can be the sold out technique. So look at those, research those, and that may be another point where you would like to complete your PowerPoint presentation. Obedience to authority. This is Stanley Milgram's study, and I'm going to show you a video at the end of this presentation. There's something that's very interesting. Many of us would say that nobody could make me kill anybody, or nobody could make me harm my child. But this study shows that our obedience to authority figures may very well cause us to do things that we wouldn't ordinarily do. So look at that and see what you come across with. That is the end of our presentation or our Chapter 12 lecture. But I do want you to see this video on
social scientists conducted a
Stanley Milgram's
examining the nature of human behavior
I'm sorry, I paused it some kind of way. Well, it's coming. I hope. Maybe not. I thought I had all of this done, y'all.
Relationship to social convention.
In this setting, I willingly expose my throat to a man with a razor.
Okay, guys, this is Stanley Milgram's study. He's a psychologist, American psychologist, and he is talking about, well, he will talk about his Milgram study where he got people to administer electric shock to other individuals, even though those individuals are demonstrating a level of pain. So listen to that. Thank you.
And in no way limited by feelings of compassion or conscience. These are questions.
Well, he might be dead in there. The experiment requires that you continue teaching. 330 volts.
The experiments that Milgram and others conducted were controversial, and for ethical reasons may never be conducted again. Yet the results of those experiments remain groundbreaking, profoundly revealing about the tensions between...
Some of this may be grainy because it is an old study. Just kind of hang in there, and it's only about 8-9 minutes left, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
In 1962, Stanley Milgram shocked the world with his study on obedience. To test his theories, he invented an event that would become a window into human cruelty. In ascending order, a row of buttons marked the amount of voltage one person would inflict upon another. Milgram's original motive for the experiment was to understand the unthinkable, how the German people could permit the extermination of the Jews.
When I learn of incidents such as the massacre of millions of men, women, and children perpetrated by the Nazis in World War II, how is it possible, I ask myself, that ordinary people, who are courteous and decent in everyday life, can act callously, inhumanely, without any limitations of conscience. Now, there are some studies in my discipline, social psychology, that seem to provide a clue to this question. The problem I wanted to study was a little different. It went a little bit further. It was the issue of authority. Under what conditions would a person obey authority who commanded actions that went against conscience? These are exactly the questions that I wanted to investigate at Yale University.
It is May 1962. An experiment is being conducted in the Elegant Interaction Laboratory at Yale University. The subjects are 40 males between the ages of 20 and 50 residing in the greater New Haven area.
Psychologists have developed several theories to explain how people learn. One theory is that people learn things correctly whenever they get punished for making a mistake.
40 years later, Milgram's infamous experiment, obedience, is still taught in classrooms around the world.
Would you open those and tell me which of you is which, please? Teacher. All right, now the next thing we'll have to do is set the learner up so that he can get some sort of punishment.
What inspired Milgram, I would say there were a number of factors. One of them is he was very ambitious. He wanted to make a mark in social psychology. And he wanted, as he wrote to one friend, he wanted to come up with the boldest experiment that he could think of.
Would you roll up your right sleeve, please? This electrode is connected to the shock generator in the next room. And this electrode paste is to provide a good contact to avoid any blister or burn. Do you have any questions now before we go into the next room?
About 2 years ago, I was at the Veterans Hospital in West Haven. And while there, they detected a heart condition. There's nothing serious, but as long as I'm having these shocks, how strong are they? How dangerous are they?
Well, no, although they may be painful, they're not dangerous. Anything else?
No, that's all.
All right, teacher, would you take the test and be seated in front of the shock generator, please, in the next room?
But the experiment was rigged.
The victim was an accomplice of the experiment. The victim, according to plan, provided many wrong answers. His verbal responses were standardized on tape, and each protest was coordinated to a particular voltage level on the shock generator.
Now, as teacher, you were seated in front of this impressive-looking instrument, the shock generator. Its essential feature is a line of switches that goes from 15 volts to 450 volts, and a set of verbal designations that goes from slight shock to moderate shock, strong shock, very strong shock, intense shock, extreme intensity shock, and finally XXX, danger severe shock. Your job, the experimenter explains to you, is a word pair test. If he gets each answer correctly, fine, you move on to the next pair. But if he makes a mistake, you are instructed to give him an electric shock, starting with 15 volts. And you increase the shock one step on each error.
Incorrect. You'll now get a shock of 105. Hard hit. Just how far can you go in this thing? As far as is necessary. What do you mean, as far as is necessary?
Milgram was very much aware that obedience is a necessary ingredient for society to function. But he focused on the darker side of obedience.
Incorrect. 150 volts. Sad face.
Wait a minute. That's all. Get me out of here. I told you I had heart trouble. My heart's starting to bother me now.
It's absolutely essential that you continue. You got no other choice, teacher.
Oh, I have a lot of choices. My number one choice is that I wouldn't go on if I thought he was being harmed.
Now, this man makes disobedience seem a very rational and simple deed. Now, other subjects respond quite differently to the experimenter's authority.
Wrong. It's hair. 75 volts, Jim. You don't know.
Please continue.
Some psychologists were troubled by the ethics of it. Many, if not most subjects, found it a highly stressful, conflicted experience. People are stammering, stuttering, laughing hysterically and inappropriately.
150 volts.
Experimenter. That's all. Get me out of here. I told you I had heart trouble. My heart's starting to bother me now. Get me out of here, please. Let me out of here. You have no right to keep me here. Let me out. Let me out of here. Let me out.
Continue, please.
Let me out of here. My heart's bothering me. Let
Go
me
on.
out. Let me out.
Clearly, when we say people went to the top of the shock board, it wasn't like they were going blithely, sadistically. People went stop and go, stop and go. They were in a state of conflict which was created a tremendous amount of stress. So that was the main critique.
This will be at 3:30.
As his voice began to show increasing frustration, so did I. And I was really in a state of real conflict and agitation. One of Stanley Milgram's basic contributions was that you don't ask people what they would do given this hypothetical situation. You put them in the situation.
Wrong. I want the 180 volts.
Please continue, teacher.
180 volts.
I can't stand the pain. Let me out of here.
Stand it. I'm not going to kill that man there.
According to Milgram, one of the things that's a prerequisite for carrying out acts that are evil is to shed responsibility from your shoulders and hand it over to the person in charge.
I mean, who's going to take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman?
I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please.
Next one, slow.
He didn't hold any gun to anybody's head. Just the fact that he conveyed a sense of authority. Roughly 60-65% of the people went all the way to the top of the shock board.
450.
Or not, we
But
must.
he might be dead in there.
Sorry guys, but I was trying to cut off the video. I am sure that you get the gist of what we were trying to show you at this point. I only want this video, our lecture, to last for about 30 minutes, so I am going to end it as much as I can end it. But I think chapter 12 and completing your PowerPoint presentations. So if you have questions, you know how to contact me. awillis@lawsonstate.edu or